Hop là.
Wow.
Darn.
Wow.
C'est la vie.
Still not showing. There should be a problem.
Yeah. I'm thinking, can you go live and then add me?
Okay.
I don't know if we can
You
do
think
that.
it's well, I don't know if that will work since the people are following you.
Yeah. Okay, but if it's, I think we can start like this. I think
That's all
it's
right.
okay.
If that's perfect, if people can hear me, then fine.
Yeah.
I'll follow
Can
it
you
through
guys
that
hear
way.
him? Okay, let's try. Let's try you. Oh, I lost him. Okay. Hello. Let's try you go live.
Oh,
Hello.
hello,
Perfect.
finally. Uh,
Good evening.
Good
I'm
evening.
happy this works.
Yeah.
Hope you're
It's good.
doing good. I see you're in your
Yeah.
study.
Yeah.
Hello.
Thank you. Yeah.
Just gonna wait maybe for like a few seconds for maybe some more people to join
Okay.
so we
All
can
right.
just talk. Are
All
you in
right.
Nigeria at the moment?
No, I'm in
Where are you?
Paris.
You're in
I'm in
Paris.
Paris.
Ah,
Yeah.
are you going out de confirmo? Are you still
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
in
started
confinement?
work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, scantily.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So
I
I do
work
three
from
days.
home.
I say
Yeah.
3 days on site
Mm-hmm.
and 2 days
Mm-hmm.
from home. Yeah.
Okay, not bad.
Yeah, but
And
yeah.
do you like drive or you use the metro?
No, I drive.
Ah,
And I
okay.
don't stay far from my
Safer.
work. Yeah,
Perfect.
very
Yeah.
well. Yeah. Okay, so you still work from home?
Yes, I'm going to work from home till like July. Like even if my
Ah,
office opens up, I told them I was like I'm working from home until I feel like it's safe to
okay,
go outside.
that's all right.
Yeah,
Yeah, so far.
not taking
Thank
chances.
you. Yeah. Mm.
Okay, so I think we can start
All right.
already.
Yeah.
Um, so we're gonna start with a very basic question. It's like a cliche. So who is Dr. Aderemi Oladele and what does he do? Can you introduce yourself to us?
Okay. Well, you know the name already.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Nigerian and I live in Paris.
Okay.
I work presently with the Nigerian delegation to UNESCO as a senior research officer. And I have a PhD in international relations and diplomacy.
Mm-hmm.
And as a researcher, um, apart from my 9 to 6 job,
Nine to
I still
six.
do a lot of research work, independent research, and I belong to
Mm-hmm.
some professional bodies.
Okay.
And I volunteer for some organizations, think tanks as advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Wow.
Most especially those that has to do with my profession and um, into sustainable development
Mm-hmm.
and then international studies. Well, uh,
Even. Mm-hmm.
for example, between 2014 and 2016, I
Okay.
was a visiting associate professor at the National Open University of Nigeria. And presently,
Ah.
I am part of the faculty of the Paris Graduate School. So that is me.
That is very, very, very long and very interesting that one man can do all of this at once. It's incredible. You mentioned UNESCO. For those that are not very familiar, what is UNESCO and what kind of activities are they involved in? Could you please give us an
UNESCO is
introduction?
the UN intellectual body.
Mm.
In fact, the only UN specialized agency that has 5 areas of mandate.
Yeah.
So it is called the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And UNESCO sets policies as an intellectual body and
Mm-hmm.
technical assistance organization, work in the fields of education,
Mm-hmm.
natural sciences, social and human sciences, culture, communication, and information. So you can see there are a lot of chapeaus.
Yes,
UNESCO, what
it's
do
everywhere.
UNESCO
Mm-hmm.
do? They set policies
Mm-hmm.
for countries in these areas. If you've ever heard of universal basic education, right in all our countries, this policy started in UNESCO. And as you know, as with any typical UN bodies, it's the member states that run it.
Mm-hmm.
They are the executives of the organization, so they decide on what they want, they set their priorities, and UNESCO deploy its experts to help to formulate policies which the member states approve and then implement voluntarily. in their countries. So this is
So,
all about.
mhm. Sorry, I cut you off. Please continue.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So it's also UNESCO is also a laboratory of ideas, so to say. That is, it has a lot of close association with the academia, research institutes all over the world, and they come out with ideas in all these fields that they are, working on to help countries. And all the time it is to help countries, because right now development work is about improvement at the country level. So the main aim is to improve policies and livelihoods in member states at the local level, so to say. Yeah.
And at the moment, how many member states are there?
Now, UNESCO has 195 member states.
195.
Yes.
Okay. And what kind of activities specifically are you involved in Africa? If we're, going into that, like what kind of activities do you do at UNESCO?
But before I joined UNESCO,
No, at the moment, you specifically, because you're a senior researcher, yeah?
Yeah. Well, my research work now, as you can see, UNESCO is a multidisciplinary body. So we're into many areas of focus. And it's the same thing with what I research on my desk. Apart from the fact that I specialize in international development, political economy, and Africa's geopolitics, I do a lot of multidisciplinary research. And what do I mean? When you talk about, for example, how does philosophy affect peace in Africa? How does futures literacy affect governance in Africa? You can see that all these things are not just one discipline, you're combining a lot of disciplines together. That's why I say all the time, if you ask me what I do, I will tell you I am a self-branded political economy. Because we do all those things, you study into education, you study into science, but everything is to improve the economy in the member states and the lots of the people. So we work so much to make sure that programs are effective at country level. And as a researcher, my work is to provide advice. I look at many things, I synchronize, I synthesize, and I come with advices. And that's what, most of the time on the pages of paper with my pen. But that's what I do basically on my desk.
And how long have you been doing this?
Well, it's been some time. Well, I joined the delegation since 2005. Okay. It's 15 years now. And I've occupied many functions before I have this title. So I've worked in...
And so when did your interest in sustainable development, when was it sparked? Has it been something you've always been interested in, or down the line during your career, you made a switch? How did this start?
Okay, yeah, I'll tell you the story if you want to hear that.
Yes, I'm interested. It's very interesting, okay. Yes.
I studied economics and political science education as a first degree. And I was planning to major in macroeconomics. Now, something changed that. I graduated in 2000, no, sorry. It's been a while. 1997. That's a long time ago. Yes. Now, in 1998, I listened to a speech given by Muhammad Yunus. If you have heard that name, is the founder of Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. Okay. He's in economics. He has a PhD in economics. And he lectured in the US before going back to Bangladesh. And that when he went back, that was when the war of secession between India Bangladesh just ended. So he narrated that he went with big theories, big economic theories, back to Bangladesh, thinking that he was going to help people.
Yeah.
And then because it was just the end of a war, he said he will go out of the class and see people lying on the street, itching to their death. Then he started to question himself. Here I am. I know big theories in economics, but I cannot help these people. So he started to think, are the theories that we put in place helping? Can we do other things? Can we see economics from another angle rather than growth? So he began to question himself, and one event happened to him that changed everything, and that was what birthed the Grameen Bank. He said one day he met a woman, you're making crafts with canes. And then he realized that this woman works had produced beautiful things, but at the same time, she was still poor. So he asked her, what is going on? How do you do your business? And the woman said, you see, I produce this for someone who lends me money to buy canes. And after I produce, I sell it to this same guy at the price that he wants. And then he said, okay, so what is going on? You cannot go to the bank. He said, no, bank will not lend to me because I am poor. And you know, in economics, there is an established theory that poor people don't pay back. And we hold this so high that we just believe it applies. Just we have from the theory of, supply and demand, cobweb theories. If you're in economics, you have some background on this, So he started to question himself. So what he did was he gathered these women, and in Bangladesh, women are into such trades, and they have the same situation. So he went, gathered them, and said, okay, if I lend you money, are you sure you will pay back? They gave him their words. So he went and lent some money in his name and gave to them. Yeah. And he realized that after 1 year, 2 years, they all paid back. They established themselves and they're doing well. And he realized that, you see, in a family, when a woman is the breadwinner, the whole family is poised to benefit.
Yeah.
So his focus now started to shift from the economic theory to social theories. That is a combination of the two. It is not about, growth or the money that you have in the economy or the theory the economics are taught us, but the social impact of what we can do, and that is economic. That's why today I call myself a political economist, because I work to improve on the loss of the people, but I consider many things: sociology, economics, politics, history, and name it, education, science. And you see, after reading that, it was quite an emotional speech. I was influenced, and I started to think back on my career. Do I want to do economics? In economics, we do a lot of mathematics, the theory of supply and demand. What is it? It is basic. It's something you can understand, really. The higher the price, the higher the demand, the higher the price. And what you do to explain that, we can do a lot of calculus that will fill 10 pages of a book. So I had a rethink, and that's why I worked for a while, and then I decided to do a master's in international development, international relations and development policy.
Okay. So you switched from macroeconomics to that?
Yeah, to that. Because I believe that will make an impact. It's a combination of economic theories, the know-how that, growth alone cannot help us. There must be impact. If you look around Africa today, you realize that, yes, Africa is an emerging economy. Nigeria is rich. Our GDP now is $546 billion. But as you can see, it's a vicious cycle of, the more we prosper, the more other people, people are getting poorer. Just a few are getting richer. That's why there is need for us. And you see, I made that sacrifice to go into development because I needed to be a voice, just in a corner, and that's all about it. The story of Muhammad Yunus that I told you, he started the Grameen Bank, yet the worldwide is known now, but it started small, from the corner of a village, to the point that it can affect the world. I see everywhere now we have adopted, a microcredit as something that is lending to the poor. We've forgotten that fact that, you see, if the conventional banks cannot lend to the poor, then microcredit banks can lend to the poor. And that's improved, small, medium scale enterprise and all that. So it's a combination of a lot of things. So that's my story.
Wow. It's amazing. You're also like influencing me to look back at this, because it's very interesting and it's very true. It's something that's needed in the world today. So you talked a lot about your advocacy on sustainable development and in this field. Were they jobs at that time, or did you have to create your own space?
Well, it's a combination of both.
Okay.
Because I was lucky. I came to France to do a master's degree. And while I was at that, 2002, by September 2003, I had a first job in UNESCO as a conference assistant.
Wow.
So I did that for a while. I replaced someone who went on the maternity leave, and I went back to do a PhD. And the PhD was, I did the coursework for 1 year, and then I was called back. So while I was working, I was doing a thesis, and the thesis was actually focused on the political economy of Africa's renewal. How sustainable development influenced the running of the development affairs in Africa. So there I talk about the result culture and what the international policies is bringing to local development in Africa. Changing the mentality of begging bowl politics. I don't know whether you know that. A request for aid all the time.
Okay.
Whereas Africa is rich, but we keep begging to develop. And then there is this theory that is coined by one of our professors in Africa, Professor Akiriade. He's a social scientist. It is a French word which says plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose in Africa. That is, we make policies all the time. We're busy trying to improve on the pages of papers, but plus ça change in writing, plus c'est la même chose in reality. We're still on it up to today. There has been improvement, I will not lie, but we still have a long way to go. So I studied into that, and doing that actually is, well, I self-sacrifice a lot, because first I wanted to write the thesis on sustainable development in Africa. But at some point I said, how can you achieve this if the public institutions are not right? If the political economic system are not right? And the quest for renewal in Africa, we go around it. It started with the Lagos Plan of Action, and then on and on. We have the new Partnership for Africa's Development. So I put all this together. What have we done to improve the institutional mechanism that will enable policies that will make sustainable development work in Africa? So that thesis is titled Development Management and the Political Economy of Africa's Renewal. That's what I wrote my thesis on. And that was the beginning of the larger journey, into that. You remember, if you have a PhD, you have to sustain it with researches. Yes. So I've done many more researches on that, sustainable development in Africa, institutional management, and all that up to now. And I'm still at it. So that's what I'm busy doing, still learning. Everything, every step is an opportunity to learn. As you contribute, you learn. That's what I do every day.
Okay. I have a question to ask. It might seem a bit silly because it's quite broad. It's a quite a broad question to ask. But in your own words, like, what do you think are some of the major steps we can do to like towards sustainable development in Africa? What are the minor steps that we can do to attain
Yeah.
that goal in this current situation?
Okay, now, you know, if you ask me this question in January, perhaps I'll tell you something else. But right now, as you can see, nothing is predictable. In fact, what we should be looking at in the world now is the situation of two people who fell in love. I don't know whether you've fallen in love before.
No.
When you fall in love, you have this picture that it will be happy ever after.
Yeah.
So you're living your life like that without thinking of what will come next. Now, at some point, if one of the couples fall out of love, then on that spot, the two of them begin to think of what to do next. And I think that's the situation. I'm beginning to see that now, that this is what it is. You know, we can have a fabulous policy like the SDGs. It's fabulous, and I'll tell you why it is fabulous. Because for the first time, there was a wide consultation around the world for an international policy. Before, it used to be a one-size-fits-all. That is, the international community set rules for others to follow. Now, this time, remember, before 2015, when the SDGs were released, there was even a common African position that was interposed into the SDGs. And that's why we have something like peace in it, because that's a problematic for Africa. Yes. Now, so the SDGs create immense opportunities. And don't forget also, we have 17 goals, 169 targets, and about more than 300 performance indicators. That's a good help for Africa. You know, because before, all the goals that we had before, like the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, they're just broad goals. No one is talking about how you implement and evaluate. Yeah. But this time it was different. That means it has set the tone to actually check whether there is progress. Now with that issue help. But what we're finding out now, this is 2020, it's almost 5 years. Remember, we have 15 years to achieve the SDGs. Now we spent 5 years, and what we're realizing is that for Africa, we even lack data. You know, either the compilation of data or the management of data to measure our progress. That's a problem. And that's one thing we should do first, because what we realize is that in the health sector, I hope you will agree with me, and it is the truth, that in the health sector in Africa, we have more data. Because as things improve, because we've fought malaria, polio, and all that. So that sector has been developed to have, systematic data collection. What we realize now is that the SDGs that address health issues are improving in Africa because we have data to measure. So can we say that there are actually progress right now that we cannot measure because of lack of data? That is one thing. That is a question that we can ask ourselves. Now, in any case, I wrote a piece for Lebel last year, I think mid last year or late last year, about African Unleashed, and I think that's what informed the title of this our discussion today. Yes. Now, what I propose there is this. As a researcher, I focus mainly on goals 16 and 17. Yeah. And goals 16 and 17 of the SDGs addresses the improvement on institutional mechanism. And I think that's what Africa needs now, more than ever before. Because up till now, we still have, the lack of political will, apart from data. That's one thing I think we should note, that for Africa to achieve the SDGs, we must improve on data. Because that is what can help us to actually evaluate and improve on action. We have 10 years more to go. 5 years is already gone. So we can do that. And then secondly is the institutional mechanism that we need to improve. politics have to improve. There must be involvement, and there must be a kind of, a clustered and integrated approach to things. If you look at it around Africa, ministries still work independently, whereas the SDGs that taught us that development challenges are intertwined. You cannot talk of education without talking of science. It's not separate. It complements each other. And that's one of the reforms that the UN had done. It started in 1995, mind you. And the UN is still reforming itself on this. That is delivery as one. It's very, very, very important. Because if not, everyone is working in different directions and you're spending resources in different directions, and you're not, really achieving much, because you treat environment as separate from even climate change sometimes,
Wow.
And from education,
And is
from
this a
politics.
problem? Sorry, is this a problem specific to Africa, or is it a global?
Well, it is not specific, but some countries that move, faster, they're adapting faster than others. That is what I would say. But Africa will still lag behind. For example, if you're talking of resort culture that we now have in the SDGs, the OECD countries have it many years ago, in the 90s. But Africa was started even hearing about it only in the year 2000, after the adoption of the MDGs. And what really caused it is the donors, the Western countries that give aid. They began to get bothered about how the aid money is used in Africa because of corruption. So the concept of aid effectiveness started. And that's why we have the Paris Plan of Action, the Accra Agenda on aid effectiveness. And to achieve aid effectiveness, then there is this in a sort of result focus. That is, as you're fighting corruption, then the impact of the program must be at the fore of any action, not just the processes. You understand? So, in that wise, Africa is late, and like in other aspects of of our dailies and development, it's still the same thing. We're still behind, and I think and we need to do more to really catch up. It's not a day's journey. Yeah.
And then in all the policies that you've mentioned so far, how is the government involvement? Are the government really involved in it? Are they pushing back? What kind of response do you have from the states involved in?
Okay, you mean
in Africa?
To the implementation of the SDGs?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, as I said, there is an ample opportunity already provided by the framework of the SDGs itself.
Okay.
And I think government is trying. It's just the approach that needs to be improved. If you look very well now, for example, Nigeria has an SDGs integrated approach. You can see that document online that you can read concerning that. That is, how will each ministry and agencies align SDGs? Because this is very, very important. In fact, my recent studies are beginning to think that the SDGs, the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, could be a new kind of political economy document, international political economy, because it actually covers every aspect of development. If you look very well, in any country, every ministry will find a duty, to align the SDGs. And because it already has performance indicators, so it's not everything. Because countries also are having their own policies and, piecemeal policies here and there that address their specific need. And also the universality of the SDGs also. Before, if you take the example of the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goal, it's a global goal. That is, it was just made there. That is made for developing countries, and developed countries can join in. But because of the consciousness that if you look at, for example, in France, there is poverty. It only has its level, if you agree with me.
Yeah.
So the SDGs was made for all countries, And it allows for every country to now adapt it to their specificity. And that's a good one. And in Africa now, you should also know there is the Agenda 2063 by the African Union Commission. This one also aligns with the SDGs, and that's what government is using. They combine both because the Agenda 2063 also delved into details, the need of Africa, because it is 100% African enacted. So government, and you see, all these things are going on. I can tell you in the case of Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, you know, there are integrated work that is going on, but there is still a lot to do because, as I said, now development work is intertwined and it must be taken as such at every level of action. Local government, state government, federal government. Yeah, and I think that's what we should do. The consciousness that we're working in a multidisciplinary environment. That is, managers, civil servants must know that I'm not only a specialist in something. Now I must not be jack of all trade, but a specialist in one or two. That is very, very important, and that will help us. And now, lastly, what I will say, I said it before, we need to improve on our institution. It was Barack Obama that said, you know, in Africa, we have a lot of brilliant people, but we lack the institution that bring their skills together to help ourselves. And this is very, very important, you know, because that is the channel. Talking of fight against corruption and all that, do you know that even in the Western world, there are corruption? But because the institutions are already in place, it is limited. Because you know that you cannot get away with it. They've said that the institution, it dated centuries. That is why it is limited. But in Africa, it is rampant because there are the institutional establishment to check is not what we're still doing trial and error. And this must be taken into consideration. That's why I said we have a long way to go. And I think that African governments will have to look more into that. And that's why I have taken it as a point of duty. And that's what I address most of the time. Institutional mechanism, it is very, very important, you know. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow. It's like so many ideas to think about. I have a question specifically about Nigeria. How, in your opinion, how is Nigeria reacting to, like, how are they actually implementing this? Because it's easy to say, okay, these are the policies that need to be implemented. These are the indicators, but are they actually, you know, pulling out these policies? Is it actually working?
Well,
because looking from the outside, it looks like nothing, like you said, nothing is changing.
Yeah. Well, if you want to take it through specific actions of government, we're getting there. And as I said, no one can say that the SDGs will be achieved by any country at this time. Because look, now we have something else to deal with just because in the last 2 months, COVID-19 came and we have to rewrite everything. Think about the economic losses, the money that will have been invested in infrastructure. They're now going to help companies to get up again. The price of petrol is falling. Nigeria is losing a lot of revenue. Our foreign reserve is going down, you know. That's why I said you cannot predict anything. It's like there must be now ad hoc solutions to everything. So the happily ever after now had a shock, and we have to deal with it the way it is. So I cannot say that, well, Nigeria will achieve it. But if you look at specific actions of government now, I'm not a politician, so I will not speak that any government is doing well or not. Well, we can evaluate and all that. But from what I'm seeing, there are things that have been done in the area of, you know, infrastructural improvement, for example, and then local production of in agriculture. These are things And for me, Nigeria is leading the way in the Africa emergence. The only thing that I find to be impediment is that political will. If you look at it, Lagos, for example, that's the hub of startups. A lot of things are going on, and the private sector is doing well. But unlike in Rwanda, where the government is really involved in startups and all that, it is now that the government of Nigeria is starting. So we will come late, but we're getting there little by little.
There's hope.
Yeah, there is hope. There is hope. If it is sustained at this level or intensified, it has to be intensified as well. Because sometimes we don't do much. Or we're also very lazy about things. Yeah. And you know, I'm involved, I'm included.
I was just informed that you might have to leave in like 11 minutes. So I'm going to try and ask you, I have so many other questions, but I'm going to try and pick the most important ones. When I was reading about you, I saw that you were involved with ISEC.
Yes.
I was previously involved with ISEC. I found that like interesting. When I was in university,
oh, wow.
I was a volunteer. You said you did this in your early career. Like, did that open the way for you to think about this? And, okay.
Yes.
That's interesting to know.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I joined ISEC in 1995.
Wow.
And I only left in 2003 or 2004. Yeah, even when I came to France, I was volunteering for ISEC France. You know, and that's actually for my first job that took me to Gabon as a trainee. It was through ISEC.
Oh,
yes. So,
cool.
Yeah.
So you do so many things. Like during this call, we've talked about a lot of your activities. How do you make time to like unwind? What do you do like in your personal life to unwind? How do you balance it with family life? Because I saw you have a few kids, 3 boys, on your Instagram page. How do you make time to spend with them?
Well, it's a challenge. And I'll tell you, up till now, I still don't believe I have enough time for my family, but I try, you know.
That's important.
I try to do that. It's just a question of finding a balance and understanding family members. You know, there are these few hours to be alone. You know, when you do so many things, activities at work, you know, independent research, and church, there are many things to do. But there's one thing I've realized, that whatever you put your mind on, the human mind is very, you know, broad and powerful.
Very, very true.
It's just a question of making up your mind and to be ready to make sacrifices. And I'll tell you, sacrifice is one thing. I make sacrifice. My family make a lot of sacrifice, even more than I do. And I think it's paramount to this, to achieve all these things, because, you know, they come in floods. And, you know, the more you do, the more you're solicited. And the more you're challenged to do. That is what I found out. Yeah. So sacrifice, and then focus.
Sacrifice and focus.
Sometimes you have to focus. Yeah.
I'm like writing it down from like my personal life. Sacrifice and focus. And you're also the residence pastor of the RCCG Paris family. How do you also make time for that? Like, you do so many things, you know, like what factor is that in your life? God and everything.
Yeah, I think in the area of inspiration, you know, I realized that the word of God that says is a reward of them who diligently seek him is actually real. He that waters shall be watered. Sometimes, as you serve God, it may be tedious, but it makes other things in your life comes easy. You're already inspired before you get at it. And you know, people will wonder, how do you cope? But this is what I find this to be. Although sometimes you find that, okay, well, you say to yourself, if I'm not in church, maybe I will have, you know, been flying higher than these and all that. Like, no. There's something sometimes when you take it slowly, you realize that you're even the fastest. Think about it.
Wow.
I'll just give you this story. I got married and I waited 9 years to have a child. But by the time on that spot, I had 3 boys.
Wow.
So what I had thought was slow, became a speed in the end. So working for God is not a joke. I am spiritual. I'm not religious, but I'm very, very spiritual. So I believe there is a God that oversees everything. And think about it. You know, the air that will breathe, the sun, the moon, it inspires you. You look at your window, right now beside my window,
the sunset,
you know,
sunrise.
now it is 6 minutes to 9, and you wonder, okay, the day is still bright, and when we go to winter, it's already dark. Okay, who orchestrates all this? And you know, it's May. This is spring. The birds are flying. I'm hearing. I live in Paris, but I live, you know, near some, you know, woods and all that. You hear the birds crying and all that. It's amazing. All these things, you know, when you think about the goodness of God, there is that song that says, oh Lord, my God, when I'm in awesome wonder, consider all that your hands have made. All these things inspires you, no matter what. So when you sit down, and you can't, and if you just go back in history, and I will tell you that we just spoke about lockdown. I will tell you the story of Isaac Newton. In 1886, you know, a lockdown like we just had. Then it was during the London Great Plague. Isaac Newton quarantined in his village. He left Oxford University to go to his village to quarantine. He was studying then. So he went there to quarantine. And one day he was sitting at the backyard and he saw an apple fell. So he started to think, what is the force that make it fall? And all that. And you know, at the end of the day, he came up with the law of gravity. The thing has been there, but they studied into it and established it. And you see, when people began to go to space, they realized it was really real. So that's an inspiration that you can have. When you look at the nature, you see God in nature and all that. And you see, it was also at the same time that he invented the calculus, the same Isaac Newton. And he studied light, you know. That is, when you see a white light, I can bet it, there are more than 9 colors in it. He established that. So nature inspires you, and God inspires you. God is in nature. He created all things. And when you look at it, you marvel at what he does. And it's a source of inspiration. It helps. So that helps a lot. It's a combination of spirituality, you know, and, you know, it helps you in your work. And this is when you water, you're watered.
When you water, you're watered. I'm going to keep that as a quote. Sorry. So there's this question we always ask everyone we talk with. What does the African identity mean to you? So what are the top 3 words that come into your mind when I say African identity?
That's a tough one. Yeah, to tell you on the spot. Yeah. The African identity, I will tell you. And right now, I'm writing a research. It's a joint book, you know, a co-authored book with many other researchers, and I'm doing just a chapter. We'll call it Beauty in the African Thought, a critique of the Western idea of development. That book, we hope it will come out in 2020, late 2020. The African identity is the beauty in the African thought. As I talk to you now, I am a born, bred, and buttered Yoruba man. And when we talk of Yoruba philosophy, and I know many other tribes in Africa, if you go to the Papunos in Central Africa, the Fon, we have these beautiful philosophies about life, and it helps. And guess what? That is what the world is referring to when we talk about climate change and sustainable development these days. Now we're talking about, you know, over-reliance on growth and all that. Africa, we don't over-rely on growth as an identity. Pre-colonial Africa, we believe in communitarianism. That it is not about it's not all about what you possess. It's about sharing. It's about leaving some for other people.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, then I'll end with this. I read an interview that was given to Ojukwu, the leader of the Nigerian Biafra, by Frederick Forsyth. If you have read that book, it is called Emeka. The title of that book, you can note it down. It's a very interesting biography about Odumegwu Ojukwu. Now he was asked, what do you think is the difference between the African mentality? You know, why is it that Africa is less developed than the Western world? And he had this to say. He said, look, I think that for me, that is Ojukwu's talking now, that the point of departure is the way the African and the Western world relate with God and nature. Now I give an example that an African man, a shepherd, going in the forest and is confronted with a strange mountain. The first thing that will come to his mind is that he wants to bring one calf out of his miserable hands to sacrifice to the god of the mountain. And he will bow down to worship that mountain. You know, he's in awe of God. Because he sees God in that mountain, just like I said now. But he's in awe of God. To him, God is unapproachable, is awesome, is a fearful and fierce God. That is an identity. And you see, you don't do anything without sacrificing back to the gods. But a Westerner, faced with the same, we want to move around, explore it. You know, he will climb the cliffs to see what is it, you know, to amuse himself, tourism and all that. And he would dig the mountain to see whether he can mine gold from there. So, because to him, the God of the white man is a God of love. He gives freely and everything, you know, that God has belonged to him. Now, what is the leverage? Now, because the white man, the Westerner, had explored nature so much for economic benefit. That is why we have the problem of climate change and all that now. Now, the same white man is coming back to the African identity about nature and culture. Yeah, if you have heard about sustainable fishing, you will know that what it means is that people catch fishes any size, you know, and they sell it for money to grow the economy. But now, sustainable fishing means that if a fish is not ripe enough, it's still young. You don't kill it or sell it. You throw it back to the sea. And that's what the African man had always done. Sacrifice back to the god of the sea. You know, it could be wrapped in myths and mythology and religion and all that, but that's what we do. Think about it, even the law of hygiene in the house, you tag it to something. That if your house is not clean, then, you know, one God will strike you or something like that. Yeah, if you remove religion and myth and superstition from it, we're actually practicing sustainability. And that's, for me, the African identity. And the African identity is also the pride in color, the pride in what we have, you know, to stick to it and, you know, sell it. Because I think what we're doing is we're not selling it enough and we're not developing it enough. We leave it raw, like Ojukwu said.
Wow.
And I believe that the African identity is also a source of pride for us. I'm black, you're black, you know, and you see, we're not inferior. The African is not inferior. Yeah.
Thank you so very much for your time today. You've given all of us a lot to think about. It's very interesting to hear your point of view and the activities you're doing. It's super interesting. I don't know if you have any last words to encourage someone that is interested in, you know, advocacy on sustainable development, climate change, political topics. Do you have any words of advice for them?
Well, what I say is this: whatever you do, you are a politician. Now, like I said, health policies, science policy, education policy, um, they all contribute to the growth of the economy and the improvement of the lot of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Now it is onus on you to think about the implication of your everyday action on the common good. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, the extreme case is that we have civil servants who has on their table files of roads that will be constructed and they are delayed because they needed a bribe. And they still say, oh, we don't know what this government is doing. That's the extreme case. And all of us, we have this tendency that in our desk, we don't think of the extension of our action. So all of us, we're social animals, we're political animals. And no matter what, everything we do, just think about it. Even a cleaner is working for the common good of all. So he is a politician, he's into politics, he's contributing his quota. And that is so, I will not advise anyone to change, discipline and all that. But we should know that we're social animals, we're political animals, and we contribute one way or the other. Everything we do, think about it. Manufacturing, whatever it is, we're working to serve people, and we must think of the common good every day that we are at that job or work or research or policy or thinking. Yeah, so that's my advice.
Thank you very much. I see we don't have any last questions. I forgot to ask if we had questions earlier, but thank you very much. I'm sorry for taking a bit of your time. Wish you all the
My
best.
pleasure.
Hopefully when the churches open back up in Paris, I get to meet you in real life because I'm also in Paris, our family.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm